Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris reviews the GH5 II. Now, normally for these podcasts, we record the week prior, but actually in this case, Chris was on vacation. So instead of recording extra early, we decided to take the opportunity for Chris to test out the GH5 II while he was in Mexico, and we were just going to put the podcast out a day or two late in order to get this out as quickly as possible. The camera just came out, so this is very new information, so hopefully you enjoy it. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you like it, we would love it if you went to iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts and click the subscribe button so that the podcast downloads straight to your mobile device every Monday morning, or in this case, I guess, Wednesday morning or something. Normally Monday morning. So with all that out of the way, here's Chris to talk about the GH5 II.
There was a big announcement today, and that's the Panasonic Lumix GH5 Mark II. So we had our hands on it, or we've had our hands on it. In fact, I have my hands on it right now. I got to take it down to Cabo San Lucas in Mexico for the last week, and was able to shoot it amongst my normal vacation. So, I did some tests. It wasn't quite as rigorous as I normally would be. Going to be doing those tests later this week, but we wanted to get you our initial thoughts and really so you can understand what the camera's all about, all the main features, the pros and cons, and whatnot. So some of this is anecdotal. Some of it is, actually tested. So I'll let you know when that is. So I got some notes here. I'm going to make sure to cover all that. The full review, so all of our test footage, all of the review written is going to be on videomaker.com. So keep checking back there where it's going to be. I'm going to be putting out content over time with that. Eventually the review will be done. We'll tell everybody about it then. But if you want to see the test footage, it should be available right now. And we'll put a link in the YouTube description, I guess, and maybe on the podcast. But just go to Videomaker and it'll be there. So make sure to check that out. It's got all the test footage. So the stuff I'm referring to, it'll all be there for you to actually look at. All right. So right off the bat, the camera is $1,700. Now that's more money than the GH5, but it's less money than what they say the GH6 might be. So it's right in the middle there. I did just tease the GH6, and they made that announcement, and I'll talk about that at the end of this of the podcast. So first off, it's the same sensor as in the GH5, just the GH5 Mark I. And the difference is there's a new AR coating on the sensor, and this is to correct some of some weird glint, whatnot, reflection that was coming through the lenses. And I noticed this actually when I did the review, the GH5, and I thought it was kind of pretty, but sometimes it was not wanted. And it showed up kind of as a purple lens flare type of a thing, but it was also like a reflection of the inside of the lens and sensor area. So this coating should resolve that. I haven't experienced it at all, whereas it was one of the very first things I experienced when shooting the GH5 when it came out. So let's see here. The camera, just like the GH5, shoots up to 180 frames per second in VFR, or variable frame rate mode. That's in HD, and it comes equipped with Vlog L. Now that's the Vericam version of that. So it's different than the just regular Vlog. It should be better. And in the GH5, you had to pay to get Vlog as an upgrade. I think it was $100 or maybe $150. And that's still, you could buy a camera with or without it. For the price difference, I imagine most people would just buy it that way. But if you already have the GH5, you could actually get the upgrade after the fact. But it's included in this camera, so that is already right off the bat $100 added to the value of this camera, or added to the GH5. So that's really cool. The camera can shoot internally DCI 4K at 60 frames per second in long GOP, or at 420, or 422 at 30p, and there is no record limit time on anything. So no matter what you shoot, there'll be no limit except for your battery life and your media, the amount of media you have. So the camera will stop if the battery dies or if you fill up your card. So that's really nice, unique, not as unique as it once was, but definitely something that is valuable. When the cool thing that's different here than the GH5 is while you're shooting at those high resolutions and data rates and color sampling bit depths, is that you can also simultaneously, as you're capturing internally, go out the HDMI for 10-bit 422 out the in UHD or no DCI 4K. So you can go into say like a Atomos Ninja 5, or I think there's a 5 Plus now, that can capture in, maybe you want to do it in ProRes or ProRes RAW or something else, along with the HVAC files internally. I don't really love HVAC files in general. It's a lot easier to play 12K RAW, Blackmagic RAW, or 8K Red Code RAW in my system than anything HVAC. And it's just it's a great encoder, but when it's decoding, it takes a lot of resources and just doesn't seem to make the camera or the computer very happy when I'm editing. And I have a pretty beefy computer. The thing that I really enjoyed shooting on this camera. So I brought a couple lenses. I only ended up shooting 2 different lenses. And the reason why is I didn't end up needing any low F numbers because it was super bright, and I unfortunately didn't bring an ND. So I was shooting at like F22 almost the whole time when I was outside. So it didn't really matter that the 12 to 60 kit lens has F4 or has a changing aperture. Actually, it might be more than F4. What is this? 2.8 to 4. So 4 is the minimum aperture when you're zoomed all the way in. And so that was good. It did some testing with that, but really what I enjoyed was the anamorphic on this camera. Now, given there was already anamorphic on the GH5, GH5S, the BGH1, as far as micro four thirds goes. So there was already that support. But what this camera offers that they don't is image stabilization for those lenses. So I have here a Sururi 50 millimeter anamorphic 1.33x here. It's a fixed lens, right? So I have an aperture control on the outside. It only goes up to f16. But that, I don't even get autofocus with the sucker, which is fine. But the image stabilization really makes a big difference, especially here that you're shooting 50 millimeter on a micro four thirds sensor, which is a 2x crop. So this is really like walking around with 100 millimeters. If you don't have image stabilization when you're shooting video at 100 millimeters, either you have to have an amazing stable hand, and I just don't think that that most would be able to do a shot worth watching without it. And it worked well. Before, if you used image stabilization, it would be strange. It didn't know what to do with the weird aspect ratio and that kind of thing. So it just acted strange. And so that is a big upgrade here on the camera. Now the other really big value that goes to this camera is you can now live stream directly from it. Now, given you have to go to a smartphone or to a router to do it, you're not going to have internet connectivity with the actual camera itself, but that you're going to be able to, just by using a cell phone, be able to go live stream anywhere that you have a signal and enough bandwidth to actually put it out there. So that's really cool. I think that's something that's going to be added to a lot of cameras. It's definitely something that the market is demanding. I think at this point, when the pandemic started, every brand rushed to get a webcam app so that people could use their nicer than webcams on their computers for all their video calls and all the rest. And I really enjoyed how simple the Lumix webcam software was, and enough that you could. With the BGH1, I did a anamorphic webcam, given it's only 133, but still anamorphic webcam, which, who has that, right? So that's pretty neat. But the cool thing is just being able to live stream. And so that's the other big added value here is from the GH5. These aren't groundbreakingly differences between the GH5, GH5 II. Really what it came down to is they maxed out what they could do with the GH5. And so they needed to release another camera to be able to offer new features. However, they teased with the GH6 that it will be significantly upgraded. So this is definitely a step in the way to a new version. But this is the first time, we had the, GH3, GH4, GH5, and now this is a GH5 Mark II. They haven't had a Mark II in this line, so this is somewhat unique for them, but it is priced in between there. The cool thing about shooting on Micro Four Thirds in general is you just get a better lens price because you don't need to cover up a large sensor. So because of that, you're going to be able to get high quality lenses at a price. I'm jumping ahead here a little bit. Let's see here. So the live streaming, so that is something that we're going to want to test. I haven't done any of that. Didn't want to use my my phone in Mexico to live stream on a camera that hadn't been released yet. So I'm going to be doing that coming, and that'll be added to our review as well. So let's get into the pros and cons, really the things that we liked, what we didn't like, and then really the results from our testing. So the things that we really like: anamorphic image stabilization. That's fantastic. The sensor stabilization on this camera is good. Definitely wouldn't even think twice to handheld this camera well, with this lens, it was 120 millimeter with the effective focal length would be, and I was able to hold and shoot stable footage worth watching, stuff that wasn't too shaky. You could see everything you needed to do. It was great. So that's really awesome. And then with brands like Surrey making affordable anamorphic lenses, it's a really nice treat. And I really enjoyed shooting with that. Now, given I was shooting just pretty things, didn't have any big goal. So in practice, you obviously, just like any time, you'd need a couple focal lengths if you really wanted to make it work. I was challenged by the minimum focus, but that's on the lens. I was getting into this a little bit. The sensor size makes his lenses affordable. So Olympus makes a bunch of really great Micro Four Thirds lenses. You're going to be able to get a really high quality, fast, large aperture lens for half the cost what you would for anything else. Canon EF, for most of the part, those are for full frame. The nicer L series glass. With Sony, even though their full frame lenses work on their Super 35 cameras, still you're paying for a full frame lens. So, this way you can get a really high quality lens, but not have to pay that rate. So you can have two lenses for the price of one on a different camera. And really, when it comes to video, that large sensor isn't offering a lot. And you might really, question, because this is a, Micro Four Thirds camera at $1,700. Canon offers full frame cameras for as low as $1,200. So you gotta wonder, well, what am I getting here? And the thing is Panasonic in general on their Lumix cameras have really set them up for video shooters. There's been, shutter angle controls, all of your, histogram and metering and shoot assist tools that video shooters need. They've had a full articulating screen forever now. At least it seems like we're talking about 5 or 6 years or maybe more. But, we have that. The battery life, although, let's not get into that yet. Let's see here. The next thing, so you can, this is not different. This is something that was upgraded in the GH5 after a little while at a firmware upgrade. But you can shoot internally DCI 4K 422 and 10-bit in all intra at 400 megabytes per second. So that's just so much data in there, so much color. And so, if you really have that need to do a lot of grading, or you need more dynamic range, shooting vlog in 10-bit in all intra at 422 is going to be, the most data that you're going to be able to do outside of shooting like RAW or something like that. And this is kind of a nice happy medium, although 400 megabytes per second or megabits per second is not anything to scoff at. But the camera has 2 SD card slots, and you can shoot either V60 or V90 cards in it. Doesn't matter, both of them will work. So it's got the 2 cards. I actually was surprised that I filled up the cards quite quickly, but I was also shooting at that 400 megabits per second. The Vlog L is included. From what I've done so far, I got the footage back yesterday, and adding the Vlog to Rec 709 LUT that I've used in the past for GH5, all of the S line, the S1, S1H, S1R, although S1R doesn't have V-Log, I don't think. It might, but I digress. It's just real nice. And of course, I love that no record limit. You know, that can be such a burden to someone that, well, here's an example. You are normally a commercial videographer. This is my background. Making commercials, you're making 30-second commercials typically. And your shots are, you know, at the longest. I mean, I've done an ad where I had one shot, it was 30 seconds. But that's as long as any shot will ever be if you're doing in real time. So having record limits has never been a burden. I mean, at all, like not a limit. But what it does happen is, you know, as most don't just stick to just one kind of production. You know, you might do some freelance work that comes in or whatever, and you have an event, say a wedding, and you need to record the ceremony. And although my wedding ceremony was only 10 minutes, and I'm very proud of that, I've been through ones that are more than an hour. You know, lots of hymns, singing, vows, you know, lighting candles, all that kind of stuff. People walking up and down the aisle. It becomes more than a burden to balance that, especially if you have two cameras that you're having to deal with that. So having the ability to continue to record is awesome with no limit on the resolution or the frame rate or any of that kind of stuff. It doesn't matter what you're shooting. You can continue to shoot until your card or your battery dies. Your card's full or your battery dies. So that's really awesome. So now getting to the cons, and some of these are, I really like the camera. I really like the GH5 in general. Before, I think it's a good value, even especially now. The GH5 is now cheaper than it was, and even the entry of this is cheaper than the GH5 was, I believe. So, you know, the first thing was the focus. Well, not the focus, the external monitor. So just like a lot of cameras, it's small, and that becomes difficult to identify what is in sharpest focus. I was using focus peaking, and I thought that would help, but even just making a little bit of wrong choice, the wrong plane was in focus, and it was really due down to the small screen. As soon as I popped on a monitor, didn't have that problem anymore. You know, and really trying to be diligent about it. Yes, I got sharper stuff. You know, I was able to be more, you know, I was able to actually choose what I wanted in focus, be more deliberate. That's the word I was looking for. But with a monitor just a little bit bigger, so this is like a 3-inch screen or something like that, going to a 5-inch screen, I was able to see those extra details to be able to get what I wanted in focus. Now I was doing some bigger, grander shots. So the example here is I was shooting from the pool of the hotel I was staying at to the it's like the Cabo Arch or something, but it's the very end of the peninsula of Baja California. And they're big old rocks, and you can see them from the hotel, the whole entire bay. You can see them from there. And there was a huge yacht with a helicopter on it that actually you could rent in Cabo. So if you're a baller and you want to go to Cabo and stay on a yacht and make everybody think you're rich, you can. Or I guess you could be rich too. But at first I was like, oh man, that's where J-Lo and Ben Affleck must be hiding out. But it's actually just always there, and there might not actually be anybody on it. It's just being out there is advertising enough for the ship or something like that. But anyway, I was trying to get it so the rocks in the background were in focus. I mean, I'm shooting at f/22 here, and so I'm on infinite focus, right? Well, just a little bit off infinite focus, I was able to focus on palm trees really close to me. And so I have a couple shots that I did a couple different focus areas, and it was, you know, I'd be able to get the back rocks in focus, or I was able to get the palm trees in my foreground, but getting the ship in sharp focus was really difficult with the small screen. So, you know, I mean, how many other cameras have a small screen? All of them, right? So it's not necessarily a GH5 problem, but I found with it that I was struggling. Let's see here. Oh, the display button. So there's a button on here that you can press display. Now it's the same location for the GH4, GH5. It might be before even the GH4. Same location. I've never had this problem with any other camera, but I hit it so many times with this camera. I mean, it's in the same place. So either the sensitivity or I changed. Maybe I changed, but I kept on hitting it. Now that's not that big of a deal. The first button turns off all of your exposure control information and maybe your audio meters and that kind of thing. You press it again, it goes to a full screen that gives you all of the control features, which is really cool. I really like it, actually. It's super helpful, especially if you're using an external screen, because now you have like a screen to look at that has all your data. This camera doesn't have a top display like a lot of other cameras might have of all your controls, so you're gonna have to really rely on that monitor. And it's nice if you're using an external monitor to be able to have the monitor below have all your details in there. So at quick glance, you can know where your settings are at and monitor your audio and the waveform and all the rest. But I kept on hitting it, over and over again. And so if you hit it one more time, so it goes, I'm not sure really the order here. It turns on and off like a horizon line to help you get a steady shot. It gets rid of the information about your exposure control, so you have just a complete blank screen. But then it shows you that full control screen, and then it's just black because it's going to the EVF, the electronic viewfinder. So I had to scroll through those, and if I was too impatient, I went past it too far and I had to click it again. Small thing, but if I was, doing this, say I was shooting a wedding down there on a camera that I wasn't very familiar with, which I wouldn't recommend, I probably could have gotten really frustrated and maybe even missed a shot because of it. So it's more to be aware of. I'm sure that, I could reassign it or something, just it's muscle memory. So as I just happened to hit it every single time I wanted to do anything, and I do it just on accident. And it was really because it's right where the crease of my thumb, that I hit it just when I was holding the camera. So again, not a big thing. Obviously something that I've been living with the other cameras for a long time and never had a problem with this camera for whatever reason, hitting it all the time. Okay, another thing. This is the anecdotal experience. So this is going to take this with a grain of salt because it's just me shooting while I'm on my vacation, enjoying myself, and thinking the battery didn't last as long as I thought it should. The battery being, I went out to shoot for a little while and turning off the camera as I'm used to and trained myself with so many cameras having poor battery life, and that the battery went dead a lot quicker than I thought it would or should. Now, was I timing it? No. Was I on vacation and not paying attention to the time? Yes. So take that with you will, but that was just kind of a feeling I had while I'm like, man, I'm changing out the battery already. And I've shot pretty much every camera in the market has to offer below $10,000 for the last 5 years. And usually my instincts and those kinds of things are somewhat right, but we will be doing a full test. So check back to videomaker.com and for a review, because I will be doing a battery life, but there wasn't any overheating or anything like that. So it wasn't a big deal. And the cool thing is it's backwards compatible with the old batteries. Although I think the new ones have been updated. You can use your GH5 or GH5S battery on it and it'll work just fine. Let's see here. So as much as I really enjoyed the anamorphic shooting, what I found now, I don't know how often you're going to be jumping between anamorphic shooting and non-anamorphic shooting. So take this as you will, as your type of workflow and shooting will really depend on how burdensome this is. But what I would have really liked to see is choosing to shoot in anamorphic mode and then it not showing me any or graying out all other controls that I can't use, and or putting all the anamorphic controls all together. So it's one thing you go to choose. You could choose anamorphic in the your record settings, and they have they tell you with a -A that it's anamorphic and it's 4:3 on the sensor. But if you want to de-squeeze that, you got to go to somewhere else in the settings to tell it to de-squeeze. Now, this is really cool. I'm glad the camera has it. I mean, other cameras don't have de-squeeze, or others, just other cameras don't have de-squeeze. So it's nice that it has it. But what I would really love is, one, if I'm shooting anamorphic, wouldn't I want to monitor and de-squeeze? So one, it could just be by default. I would be okay with that. The camera knowing, hey, you shot something 4:3, this must be anamorphic, I'm going to desqueeze it. That would work probably with this camera. I think that would work for most people that would be shooting anamorphic at this level of camera. It wouldn't be that big a deal. But what I would just love it is that all of it be there, because what also happens when you're not in desqueeze, if you go to review your footage, it doesn't desqueeze it for you. So it's this 4:3 square that looks funny, and you're like, oh man, that shot really didn't look right. And I remember being kind of bummed out at some of the shots I'd done because I actually woke up real early to shoot the sunrise on my vacation. This is for you all people. And I was looking through the footage. I'm like, oh man, after I got it done and the sunrise was already over, like, I'm just not happy with this stuff. And what I wasn't really thinking about is because I had actually, towards the end of the morning, I had started shooting regular because I wanted to get out of anamorphic. I'd been shooting it a lot, wanted to test out just the normal 17:9 or 16:9 shooting modes. And so when you're in those, it doesn't desqueeze your review of your preview of your footage. It just keeps it in square. But if you have desqueeze on, it will do that for you. So it's just one of those things. This isn't a real big thing. In fact, this probably could be a real easy thing that they could update in their settings. But I think because anamorphic lenses are coming down in price by significance, and they're good quality at this sensor size, you're still not going to be paying a lot for a nice lens like we talked about. So, I think people wanting to shoot, and the thing is when you desqueeze, anamorphic 1.33, it's 16:9. So it's not like it's unusable. It's going to be, you're going to be able to use it in a lot of your other productions. You're just going to have a nicer aspect ratio while you're shooting or what's in your frame there. So that's really cool. I love that. I love the anamorphic, but I just wish they were all together. So that was pros and cons, pretty weak cons, if you ask me. I wanted to put some things that I had frustrations with, but none of these would stop me from buying the camera. None of them are big enough to really even consider, other than to be aware of. That's what I'd say more of. They're not like, oh, it has a bad monitor. No, it's fine. In fact, it's a little bit higher resolution than the GH5. Not a lot, but a little bit more. But it's a smaller screen. So consider you probably want to get an external monitor, but that seems to be true with just about every camera. So just think about that in general. So let's talk about the results from our actual shooting. So I shot a lot of things. Aimlessly. I shot a lot of waves and water and palm trees for some reason. Even though I'm in California and I see palm trees all the time, maybe the sky was just a nice blue and I liked shooting them, but I probably have 15 shots of palm trees. I don't know why. But that's what happens when you just go and try to find pretty things to shoot. So the low light performance. So one night there is a open setting that has a glass pyramid that looks a lot like the Louvre. I've not actually been to the Louvre, but it looks like that, but it's a lot smaller. Has lights in it, and there's some other light balls around it. And so I was like, oh, this is cool. There's enough light here that everything's illuminated. Let me do our low light test. So normally I do a low light test. I do it in the studio. I do it on a test chart. It'd be a lot more scientific, but I actually feel pretty comfortable with these because there was enough really dark areas that you see what the noise is doing, but also see how the camera performs when it has enough light, all in the same image, because there was such dynamics in the shot, because really I was shooting a dark area or lights themselves. So it was a nice setting for that. And really the camera all the way up to ISO 6400 is just fine. Sure, there's a little noise starting, at 32 or so, but nothing that I would ever concern myself with. I would not hesitate to shoot if I needed to shoot at 32, 64. I'd be fine. I'd shoot it. It likely a little noise reduction like you would with a typical cinema camera, and you'd probably be fine. You wouldn't be losing much, if any, detail. However, above 6400 ISO, the noise starts to color shift and becomes a lot more noticeable and will greatly affect the detail if you denoise. It's completely distracting. It just wasn't great. So it's okay, a low light performance. And it's interesting. Did a couple shots, did one that was trying to shoot the bay, and the ship that I was telling you about was all lit up and out in the bay, and there's city lights and that kind of thing, but there wasn't a whole lot of other lights in the scene, so it was mostly dark, and the noise was just overwhelming. And I was shooting at 12,800, Yeah, 12,800 ISO. And it's just ugly, noisy. However, shooting that in a room that is lowly lit but still needs it, it's not as noticeable. But at 6400, I just kind of looked over at a table next to me that has really low light on it, and as soon as the majority of the scene was mostly lit, the noise was not an issue. And at 6400, I would feel comfortable shooting just about anything with it. So that's that. In our test, so I tested the autofocus with a subject that was playing the saxophone, and it was a bunch of people in the room, and was trying to just see how it did. Now, they weren't super well lit, but I had them exposed properly. But the contrast between them and the background wasn't great, so this kind of autofocus might struggle. But really, what it was struggling on is finding and keeping a home. And by what I mean by that is finding a subject, getting it in focus, and then going, that's the thing I'm keeping in focus. And even though it would choose the saxophone player as my main subject, and it would do a little color box around it, and then white boxes around other subjects, it still did a lot of hunting. And so I think in the daytime, likely the camera would perform a lot better. I'm going to do that test, so this is somewhat anecdotal. But I did a lot of settings changing, trying to get the settings to the application I was doing at the moment. And my best judgment on that was still not making the camera have a very good autofocus enough that it was hunting a lot. Not a significant, it wasn't like it was hunting and making my subject completely blurry, but it was enough that it was like, focus on them, focus on someone that was a little bit behind them, focus on this person that's walking past. And it just was not the greatest. So I don't know if I'd use it. I'd use it, like I said, in a really well lit area, maybe when you're not shooting a super shallow depth of field. So when it does do some hunting, it's not going to be, or it might not need to do any hunting because there's a larger focus plane. But overall, it was not something I'd use. I don't even know if I'd want to use it on a gimbal. So I would think you'd probably have just more success manually pulling the focus or keeping your subject at a certain distance from yourself to keep them in focus than you would having the autofocus keep them. I just wouldn't even use it because the hunting was enough that it just was completely distracting. So I wouldn't use it. So I guess that would have been a con, right? The autofocus, no bueno. So let's see here. Another thing that's really kind of neat is you can do pixel for pixel or full sensor. So, you can use the full sensor, or it could do pixel for pixel. So 1 pixel equals 1 pixel in what you're getting in the final product. So you can get a little bit more of a crop if you need to reach a little bit further on a shot, or, pixel for pixel is going to be better for you. Now, this is the place where, if we're talking about micro four thirds sensors over full frame sensors. And really the thing that you get with a larger sensor is either the ability to have higher resolution because you can put more pixels it's got a larger space to fit more pixels in it. So like the S1R, which is R for resolution, or like, the Canon, R5 that's got 47 megapixels, or the A7R4 from Sony, that they just fit a lot of pixels in there, so they can do, and those are for photographers, right? Those extra pixels aren't doing us any good when we're shooting video, or doing much for us. And in fact, in that higher resolution, you might have some negative benefits or negative aspects of it for shooting video through, either having too much sharp or pixel binning, or however they're doing, bringing that resolution down. But when you look at cameras like the A7S III or the Panasonic Lumix S1, what you get is larger pixels on a large sensor, and that allows it to be more sensitive. And so the GH5S, it's different because it's actually got dual native ISO. GH5S does not have any image stabilization. So it's a little bit different bird. In fact, I think they probably could have given it a different name other than it's mostly the same specs, but that's the same as the BGH1. It's pretty much a GH5 in a different form factor without a monitor and some added live streaming and connectivity benefits there. So we're really looking forward to testing it for live streaming. I think this is going to be a really good value. I think a lot in general, every product, every camera, maybe even every product that can connect to a camera should consider how they can make connectivity with the phone, let it be for live streaming or to control functions on the camera or to actually control the camera or what have you. We experienced a really great connectivity with the Red Komodo, and it's a pretty reasonably priced camera for what it does. It really, to me, shows a pivot point for manufacturers to look and go, that's how it's done. Do your own version of that, because everybody's gonna have to do it a little differently. Of course, fitting into a form factor has got a lot to do with that too. I'm looking forward to seeing that. The connectivity with a phone on the GH5 Mark II is just the same as you'd experience with others. It's great. Not hard to set up, not hard to use. But like I said, I haven't live streamed from it yet, but that shouldn't be terribly hard to either. It definitely isn't like it once was in live streaming with a camera that isn't a phone, a single camera, live stream. So let's see here. Okay. So that's the GH5 II. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. We definitely want to know what you think. Like I said, go to videomaker.com to check out the test footage and more of the stuff in detail where I can, I'm going to collect my thoughts a little bit more. I reviewed all the footage yesterday, wanted to get it out for the announcement. So the thing that they're teasing, and of course we're using it to tease too, is the GH6 coming. Not too many details here. Big detail, new sensor. Still micro four thirds, but it is not going to be the same 20.3 megapixel sensor that's in the GH5 and the GH5 Mark II. It'll be able to shoot 422 10-bit DCI 4K at 60p. That's not too different, right? But it will be able to shoot 10-bit 4K at 120 frames per second in HFR, high frame rate mode, and variable frame rate mode, VFR. And then it'll be able to shoot 10-bit 4.7K 60p. So, and they teased a little bit that it's going to have even more video shooters at mind. And I believe that because Panasonic's actually been very committed to offering the tools that a filmmaker needs in their camera that, let's face it, it's a photography camera form factor that we're now hijacking because, let's face it, the photographers have most of the functions they need these days. They're getting lots and lots of dynamic range and high frame rate shooting and just lots and lots of great features. I think it's about time that we really enrich those video features. And I think that this is that step there. I'll be really curious to see what other changes they make. I would love to see some mounting points on it if they're really talking about it being a professional camera. I know the BGH1, they highlighted that. I think they could take some cues off of Sony's FX3 that has some mounting points on it. Handle would be great, but this isn't a cinema camera, and it's going to be more money. This is going to be, I think, above $2,000. They didn't actually tell me a price, but they said it's going to be more than the GH5 II, obviously more than the GH5. So that's about it. That's all of the details that I know so far from doing what we're doing here with testing it. And hopefully you enjoyed this different podcast. We're thinking this might be something we do in the future when I'm get a camera to review, that I might do a solo podcast just to talk about the camera itself. So if you like that, let us know. If you didn't, let us know. It'd be nice. The internet's a mean place, so do it politely, maybe, please. I got a fragile heart.
Big thanks to Chris, actually, for reviewing this camera while he was on vacation. Normally you go on vacation to avoid work, and yet Chris took this camera with him and kind of worked while he was relaxing on the beach. So thanks, Chris, for doing that. Also, thank you all for listening. If you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes or Spotify, hit the subscribe button, and if you're feeling really generous, go to iTunes and leave us a written 5-star review. It helps iTunes to identify our podcast as one of the good ones, and will recommend us to other listeners. So big help there. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.